What are you made of? In order to answer this question, we have to figure out truly what are you made of? And you might answer the question and say, well, I'm made of cells, or maybe I'm made of a lot of water. And all of those things are correct, but in order to understand each level, we have to understand the levels of organization. So today we're going to answer that question. How do we study and understand the human body? By looking at the levels of organization. So what are the levels of organization? Well, it's basically what are you made of down to the smallest unit, and then tacking on bigger and bigger units as they build up. So what I mean by that is you are made at the base level of atoms. You are made of stuff, right? And these are the smallest units of all stuff, matter. You are made of matter. You take up space, right? So atoms make up you, right? So these are some examples of some atoms that you may have heard of before. So like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, all these things, Chan P, you can remember, that's usually the most common 5 in your body, but you're also made of things like sodium and calcium and potassium and chlorine. Okay, so those would be called electrolytes. So there's a whole lot of different atoms that you are made of. Now, if you put these atoms together, though, you then make molecules, things like glucose, things like sodium chloride, things like water. All of these are you just putting multiple atoms together to make a bigger unit, okay? Once you get this bigger unit, say you attach a lot of those together. Well, now you have a pretty big molecule, and you would call those macromolecules. Macro meaning big, and molecule obviously meaning molecule, which is 2 or more atoms bound together. We have 4 main macromolecules that make up our bodies, and those are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Really important to remember. Carbohydrates, some examples would be like sugars, okay? So glucose, things like glycogen that's stored in your liver, it's carbohydrates in your liver. Your cells have some carbohydrates in them to like identify each other. Lipids, like cell membranes, so fats, your cell membranes are made of fats like lipids. Cholesterol would be a great example. Steroid hormones would be great examples. Sex hormones, estrogen, androgens, those types of things. Now, both of these are made of the atoms CH and O. So those atoms are being put together in these structures to then make carbohydrates and lipids. These two also, you'll probably learn in your classes for biology that they both store energy, okay? So they're energy storage molecules so that we can harvest that energy to make our cells do stuff. The other two will be proteins, nucleic acids. Proteins, I want you to remember, literally build all of your cells. In order for your cells to be structured properly and do the proper functions, they have to have the right proteins. So proteins are basically the structure and function of all of your cells. They contain these atoms, okay? And the base unit for proteins are amino acids. So your cells chain these amino acids together to make proteins. And then finally, nucleic acids. You've probably heard of DNA and RNA before, right? So like DNA is the blueprint of your cells. The RNA is like the recipe. So these are made of the atoms CH, O, N, and P. So carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Okay, so these are just big molecules. So as we're organizing, as we're building together, this is another hierarchy of these 4 macromolecules, big molecules. Now, if you put these properly together, you make, oh, there's some examples, I missed that. So this is what they would look like. So carbohydrates, here's proteins, nucleic acids, and then lipids. You put them together though properly in your body, you will make little organs called organelles. So here's a great example of a phospholipid bilayer. This is the cell membrane, a type of organelle that surrounds your cells and also surrounds other organelles. Okay, it's kind of like coating of it. Okay, well, this connection between macromolecules and organelles is found here. A glycerol, which is basically a carbohydrate with a little bit of a lipid attached to it, attaches to a free fatty acid, which is also a lipid, okay, a base unit for a lipid. So you put those macromolecules together, you have one of the components of the cell membrane that forms the phospholipid bilayer. So that's another example. Now, let's put all of the organelles together, like mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, nucleus, all those things. Put them together, what do you get? Finally, you get a cell, okay? So this is an example of a cell. This is a neuron, and the neuron sends signals in the brain and the spinal cord, and it basically communicates with other structures. These cells will contain many organelles depending on what function they have. So if they use a lot of energy, they're going to have a lot of mitochondria because the mitochondria produces a lot of energy. If they are making a lot of proteins and modifying them, they'll probably have a lot of endoplasmic reticulum, big nucleus, those types of things, okay? But you put all those together and you finally have that cell, okay? And once you're at the cellular level, this is considered living, okay? So cells are living structures. They are able to bring in energy, do metabolism, like chemical reactions and stuff like that, and basically function independently. That being said, we are made of about 30 trillion cells, and they all function both independently but also dependently on each other, okay? So one might signal to another to do something, and then that something might do another thing to another cell. It's all interconnected, just like your body. Okay, so at this level, this is now called cytology, whereas actually right after this, we'll get into another one, histology, which is tissue. But cytology deals with studying the cells themselves. And here are some cells that you have in your body. You've probably heard of some bone cells before. So osteoblasts, osteocytes, red blood cells, white blood cells, nerve cells, cancer cells potentially if it gets bad enough. You have a pancreas, so pancreatic cells. There's all sorts of cell types, okay? And these are just made of a bunch of organelles surrounded by a cell membrane. Boom, living cell. Put some cells together with similar structures, cluster those cells together, and now you have what's called tissues, okay? There are 4 main types of tissues. I'm not going to go through them too much in this video, but this is now called histology, and the 4 tissue types are connective, epithelial, muscular, and nervous. Connective, you could probably guess, it connects things, binds things. It also builds your bones, your cartilage, and your tendons. And then you have epithelial tissue that lines your body, like your skin, the internal lining of your gut. You have muscular tissue, which moves things, anything that moves in your body, like my forehead as I'm shriveling up my forehead, moving my arms, or even when my heart is beating and moving. That's all muscular tissue. And then finally, you have nervous tissue, which is basically neurons and their supporting cells, glial cells, that will help send signals throughout the body. You put tissues together, and finally, we have something we've heard of before, right? An organ, okay? So organs are just collections of 2 or more tissue types to do a certain function, all right? So, for example, your skin is made of all sorts of tissue, okay? So we have connective tissue connecting all these cells in here. We've got epithelial tissue lining the top. We've got adipose tissue on the bottom to insulate you with the subcutaneous fat. We've got, goodness, there's muscular tissue that helps pull those hairs up, the erector pili muscle that pulls your hair follicles up whenever you're cold. There's all sorts of tissues all together in this form of skin, which is an organ. Okay, it's actually the biggest organ of your body. And then there's also other tissues in intestines. So you see these neurons, sensory neurons, detecting what's happening in your gut. You've got these muscles to move the intestines. You've got the lining, the epithelial tissue on the inside. There's all sorts of tissue types clustered together in a certain way to make organs, okay? Once you put organs together, working together for a common function, now you have an organ system. You've probably heard of the cardiovascular system, which deals with basically the heart as its organ and blood vessels, which are also organs. They contain multiple tissue types, okay? You put those together for a common function. So for example, pump oxygenated, nutrient-rich blood throughout the body, and then carry the waste products back to the lungs to be breathed out. That's a goal of the cardiovascular system. It deals with multiple organs working together. Finally, you put the 11 organ systems you have into one working thing, and you have an organism, the human body. So that's one way that we can study human anatomy and physiology, is based on these levels of organization. And next time, we're going to talk about the 11 organ systems and see how we can study it at the organ system level. Hey, thank you for watching. If you haven't already, like this video, subscribe it. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your support.